We have seen our courts in every level of government successfully lead an alarming number of our black and brown brothers and sisters into the perpetual exploitation, dehumanization, and physical abuse that exists within the American prison industrial complex. With the highest incarceration rate in the world, our prison system enslaves over 2.2 million people to date. But history has shown us that there is hope for the liberation of our brothers and sisters immersed in these wretched institutions. During the 1970s, George Jackson rose to the most prominent prison revolutionary and incarcerated black freedom fighter. Jackson was led into the prison system at age 17 for a trial for stealing $70 from a gas station. Advised by a public attorney, he took a plea which resulted in a 1-year-to-life intermediate sentence. A sentence he received because he was black. This sentence would consume the remainder of his life. From the confines of his cell, he joined the Black Panther Party and would go on to become their field marshal and have his articles published in the Black Panther newspaper. Much like Malcolm X, George Jackson actively educated himself behind bars to the extent that he developed the capacity to communicate the perspective and ideology necessary for the liberation of all oppressed people. He would read books with the most revolutionary titles, and he would frequently lend them to his fellow inmates. Jackson said, "We attempted to transform the black criminal mentality to black revolutionary mentality." Jackson's identification with the Revolutionary Communist Party drove him to organize and unite his fellow inmates. And through education, he helped develop a new consciousness among prisoners. He described the struggle of organizing black inmates who saw no need for revolutionary ideology. He said, "They think being a warrior is quite enough, and yet without discipline or direction, they'll end up washing cars or unclaimed bodies in the city-state morgue." He urged unity among prisoners of different nationalities. Quote, "I'm always telling brothers that some of these whites are willing to work with us against pigs. All they've got to do is stop talking hunky when the racists start fighting. All you have is the manic group against one another. That's just what the pigs want." January of 1970, a guard at Soledad Prison shot 3 black prisoners dead in an exercise yard. 3 days later, a grand jury ruled the killings were justified, and the guard went unpunished. Soon after the verdict, a white guard was found beaten to death. George Jackson and 2 other prisoners were charged with the killings of the guard, and these 3 prisoners would go on to become known as the Soledad Brothers. The growing radical movement outside the prison walls took up the defense of the 3 Soledad Brothers, and Jackson published a book titled Soledad Brother, which became a bestseller and made him internationally known. And it included letters that he wrote to his family during the trial. Because a significant number of black revolutionary leaders graduated from colonialist prisons, like the one Jackson endured, and because his fellow inmates began to look up to him, Jackson soon became a threat to the U.S. power structure and its entire captivity of the most brutally oppressed sector in society. Jackson's book titled Blood in My Eye would detail his revolutionary ideas. Specifically, he believed that the experience of repression was essential to revolutionary change, and that the vanguard could carry out the systematic overturn of capitalism by carrying out selective, retaliatory violence that would then heighten contradictions and increase repression of the people as a whole. Following his death, over 8,000 people flooded the street outside the church during his memorial, and his book Soledad Brother was passed from prisoner to prisoner. At St. Quentin, after his death, fellow prisoners began organizing and carrying out the ideas mentioned in The Blood in My Eye. The pressure began mounting, and the sentiments of prisoners was beginning to change rapidly, and as did the mood outside of prisons across the nation. The material conditions within St. Quentin extended within the barbed wire fences of other prisons and influenced the way prisoners thought and therefore reacted. Several months before Jackson's murder, the prisoners of Attica Correctional Facility formally submitted a 27-point manifesto to prison administration and the media, denouncing the facility's current conditions. The manifesto listed such demands as an end to the escalating practice of physical brutality, an immediate end to the agitation of race relations, that the correctional facility officers be prosecuted as a matter of law for shooting inmates, and that the industries be allowed to enter the institutions and employ inmates to work 8 hours a day and fit into the category of workers for scale wages, as well as the ability to form and join labor unions. A quote from the Attica Liberation Faction Manifesto of Demands, an anti-repression platform, reads, "We, the inmates of Attica Prison, have grown to recognize beyond a shadow of a doubt that because of our posture as prisoners and branded characters as alleged criminals, the administration and prison employees no longer consider or respect us as human beings, but rather as domesticated animals selected to do their bidding in slave labor and furnished as a personal whipping dog for their sadistic, psychopathic hate. We, the inmates of Attica Prison, say to you, the sincere people of society, the prison system of which your courts have rendered onto is without questioning the authority and the authoritative fangs of a coward in power." On September 9th of 1971, 1,500 inmates, more than half of Attica's prison population, rose up and seized Attica, taking guards hostage and complete control of the facility for 4 days. At the time of the uprising, there were 2,300 inmates living in a facility built for 1,600. The prison was run entirely by white staff, with 60% of Black and Latino inmates. A Liberation article titled "Attica, the 35th Anniversary of a Heroic Uprising" describes the conditions that drove prisoners into insurrection. Prisoners were only allowed 1 shower per week and 1 roll of toilet paper each month. The mail was heavily censored to cut out anything involving prisons and prisoners' rights. The medical neglect within the facility was criminal. They were also not allowed to practice their religious beliefs, and guards often pitted inmates against each other to incite racial violence. But once in power, a committee of inmates drew up 5 demands as preconditions to end the takeover. These 5 demands would be broadened into 15 proposals that would form the basis for the attempted negotiations among prisoners, the committee of outside observers and state officials, and a representative from the governor's office. The prisoners would later announce that the conflict would be peacefully resolved if the governor and billionaire Nelson Rockefeller negotiated with them. Rockefeller refused to aid in negotiations, and not once did he appear at the prison. Rockefeller's cowardly, fascist response to this very civil and practical proposal of the inmates now in charge of Attica was to storm the prison with 1,000 National Guardsmen, prison guards, and the state local police in a full-scale brutal assault on everyone inside Attica. In response to the bloodbath that ensued, the New York Special Commission wrote that, with the exception of the Indian massacres in the late 19th century, the assault which ended the 4-day prison uprising was the bloodiest one-day encounter between Americans since the Civil War. Though none of the prisoners had guns, the acquisition of the prison by the authorities was nothing short of a massacre, resulting in the death of 10 guards, 29 inmates, and 85 inmates would suffer from gunshot wounds. The U.S. government's inhumane retaliation to the Attica Uprising displays that the system sees no need to consider the rights of prisoners, and this is because it does not wish to improve their conditions. The perpetual oppression within this prison system serves a purpose. There is a reason for the exploitation of prisoners and a goal for maintaining the inhumane conditions and racist treatments of prisoners. It is the continuous enslavement and profit of Black and brown bodies. The same Liberation article details the exploitation of the prisoners. At the time of the prison insurrections in the 1970s, inmates labored for 40 cents a day, assembling mattresses, shoes, and license plates. Like nearly all prisoners under capitalism, Attica prisoners were essentially political prisoners. Prison labor is still exploited. Health care for prisoners is still abysmal. The prison system is a modern-day extension of slavery. The uprising was a class-conscious effort to unveil the most ostracized and exploited sectors of society, the millions of working-class men and women forced to endure stark living conditions as well as physical and sexual abuse behind bars. Guards beat and tortured prisoners after the revolt, resulting in a wave of prison rebellions nationwide. In the wake of the Attica massacre, prison rebellion spread like wildfire across the United States as prisoners expressed their solidarity with the Attica Rebellion. At Walpole State Prison in Massachusetts, about 200 inmates staged a day-long strike against the prison factories on September 27th. At Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, prisoners went on strike against the prison exploitative factories. At the women's prison in Alderson, West Virginia, 37 women rebelled against being transferred to maximum security prisons. And though the billionaire Governor Rockefeller ordered that all prisoners be kept under tight restrictions, nevertheless prison rebellions continued throughout the New York State. At Clinton Prison in Denimore, New York, 250 prisoners wearing black armbands briefly marched on the mess hall on September 15th after hearing about Attica. At Elmore Prison, New York, about 200 prisoners staged a protest of several hundred hours on September 14th, chanting slogans in their cells expressing solidarity with Attica inmates, and numerous other actions were organized in solidarity with the Attica revolt. Today, there are more blacks in prison or on parole than there were enslaved in 1850.
Wow.
The modern-day slavery and systematic oppression forces that reign over the prison-industrial complex has been disguised as rehabilitation for the crooks and criminals of the country. There are more than 2.2 million incarcerated people in the United States, most of them working-class people of color, including 300,000 mentally ill inmates. More than half of the prison population is comprised of blacks and Latinos. The uprising not only drew national attention to the widespread human rights abuses that prisoners face on a daily basis, it welled the workers' movement inside to an even larger class-conscious movement outside. The Attica Uprising is proof that even the most oppressed communities can organize and rise up and to fight against the oppressive forces and for the rights denied to them by the capitalist system. George Jackson's legacy and the influence of a revolutionary communist party on the conscience of oppressed people cannot be overstated. Attica was a multinational and class-conscious fight against the racist capitalist prison-industrial complex. PSL supports the current hunger strikes in Guantanamo Bay and any additional efforts to achieve liberation for political prisoners in super-oppressed communities by means of organized resistance and class-conscious movements. Thank you.